So how do you feel about boundaries? It's a legitimate question. A lot of people come to me really struggling with this concept. They often feel guilty for setting boundaries, or they're not sure about even what a boundary is. They've heard the term, set the boundary, things like that, but that's really confusing for them because it's not something that's well taught in our society nowadays, right? They know that boundaries are really important to having healthy, constructive, supportive, and wonderful relationships, but why? And oftentimes they also know that they feel like their boundaries are being violated, but they can't quite pinpoint what the boundary is that's being violated. That's why I've created the Clarifying and Creating Your Boundaries free PDF. You can find out what your boundaries are, how to tune in to what the boundary needs to be, and how to effectively create and communicate your boundary so that way you stay in this place that respects you, respects the other person, but also gives you the confidence in your boundaries so that way you stop being gaslighted, disrespected, and unseen. Having your boundaries really clear gives you a voice and also helps the other person stay in accountability with themselves. So that's not a role that you have to take on anymore. So if you are ready to really have clear boundaries, to really understand what your role is in the boundary, and to give yourself some safety and some protection against people that might try to gaslight you or are just being disrespectful, go grab my Creating and Clarifying Your Boundary PDF at erinandersonthetraumacoach.com. And while you're there, let's schedule a call with me. Come have a chat with me so that way I can really help you master this particular skill, creating boundaries, clarifying the boundary, communicating that boundary, and so that way I can also help you have relationships that show up to support you, cherish you, and love you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Other Side of the Struggle. Okay, today we're talking about why your nervous system actually might be resisting the change that you say that you want, even good change. And this happens a lot when we've dealt with trauma, right? And because if change is something that we need to do, if change is something that needs to happen, oftentimes you will notice that you're fighting yourself, that there's a lot of fear, that there's a lot of resistance to doing what you say you're going to do or doing what you need to do, okay? And here's the thing, it's not because something is necessarily wrong with you or even wrong with your nervous system. It's just your amygdala is trying to keep you alive because it has learned that there are certain things or certain scenarios that are dangerous to you. And so it tries to keep you safe. It tries to keep you away from those things. So what does that mean? It means that your nervous system loves predictability. And even if what you're in right now is traumatic and it feels unsafe and it feels toxic in a way, if it's what you've known, your nervous system or your amygdala is going to think that that is better to stay in that environment than to try and move into a different space, simply because it knows what to predict, it knows what to think, it knows how to handle this situation. If it gets into a situation that it cannot handle, well, then your nervous system is going to struggle. It feels like a struggle, okay? I should say. So what do we do? First and foremost, let's just kind of normalize this frustration because I think every single person out there has dealt with this type of a feeling before, right? Where we know what we need to do, but we just feel like we can't do it. Like there is just this massive block that's still in our way, and Doesn't matter how much we push against it, doesn't matter how much we fight against it, doesn't matter what we do, this block is not moving. And that's really frustrating, especially when you know what you need to do to create the results you want, but you just can't make yourself do it, right? This is why it's really, really, really important to understand what our thoughts are in the process and to think and to explore what other thoughts could possibly be true. Okay? Because just because we have a thought, it doesn't necessarily mean that that thought is fact. It might have been quote unquote proven to us, but it still doesn't mean that that is fact. Okay? For an example, I actually just had a chat with the sweet lady who messaged me and asked me how can she stop feeling so worthless. Here she is, she's trying to build a business, she's trying to take care of her kids, she's trying to do the right things and she knows what to do, but she just can't seem to overcome this feeling of worthlessness. And as we kind of got diving into it, one of the things that came up was just how many times people had said something or done something or treated her in such a way that was unfair, that was cruel, and abusive. And they would say things to her like, "You're not worth it. You're not good enough." Somewhere, someone taught her that she wasn't enough, and she bought into it. And the thought, like she knows, like consciously she knows that she's enough, but somewhere down deep inside of herself, she just can't convince herself that that's true. Because what she had been told seemed like the actions met up with what somebody had told her. So we got diving into this, right? To her, being of worth was scarier than feeling worthless. So what we need to understand is this isn't necessarily self-sabotage, right? This is more like protection. And especially as women, we need to feel safe in order to make the moves that we need to make. And so how do we create that safety? Like, why is it that our nervous system creates discomfort over unknown peace, right? And it's again because it feels familiar. If we know the road, it's easy to drive on. But if we don't know the road, we can get lost, we can get abandoned. Who knows what could happen if we don't know the road, right? But here's why I think it's really important to quote unquote have a road map. To know like things that are absolutely true and to go back to our values. Similar to the lady that I was talking about earlier who was really struggling to understand and accept her self-worth. Years ago, when I was really, really in that trauma sphere and struggling as much as what I was, my self-worth was really, really low. Really, really low. And people had proven to me in many ways that I didn't belong, that I wasn't good enough. Their words and their actions and their deeds were often cruel and misaligned and unfeeling and completely mean, straight up. And all I could think of during that time was, if God really was a loving God, why on earth would he put me in these situations. Like, why on earth did he allow this to happen? Why on earth didn't he stop it? See, back then, I believed that love was him stopping the bad things. And it wasn't until I realized that I had the wrong definition of love. It wasn't until I realized that things actually started to shift. Because here's the truth of the matter. God allowed me to go through those things. Yes, he didn't step in and stop the abuse. He didn't step in and stop the pain because he trusted my strength. Now, here's the thing. You know, if I was sitting there listening to that in a victim mindset, that might have sounded a little bit like a slap in the face. Thinking that I had gone through all of this hardship, right? Just because somebody trusted me to do it. But it was more like he trusted me to seek him out for truth. He trusted my strength, meaning that he knew that I would come back to him. He knew that even though, and you guys have heard my story, you know, where I yelled and screamed at him, I fussed and I threw a fit and I called him every name under the sun, and I did everything you're told not to do in a conversation with God. I did it all. And here's the thing, I realized that he was trusting me the whole time, even in that conversation. Every dart, every arrow, every knife I threw in his direction, all of that anger, he just caught one at a time, put it gently down. He never threw it back. He just caught it and put it down, and caught it and put it down. And the whole time, instead of getting angry at me for quote unquote being so disrespectful, he was relieved. He was relieved I was finally bringing this to him. That I was finally laying all of this angst, all of this pain at his feet. All of these beliefs about myself and about who he was. Laying it all at his feet. I never spoke up to people who had disrespected me. I never stopped them myself. I always just huddled in a corner and took it. And why? Because my nervous system was used to that. And heartbreakingly, I just allowed people to interrupt me when I tried to speak and stop talking, because that's what my nervous system was used to. And thinking back, like, now my heart aches for that person, right? But it was so normal for me. It was so normal. What finally changed was when I decided to really think about what I knew. Where had love actually shown up in my life? And to me, that is God, right? My highest form of love is God. Meaning, he knows what he made when he made me. He has never once dismissed me. He has never once told me that I was a mistake. Yet I took all of the words and all the actions of other people around me, all the abuse, as someone like God actually telling me that that was true. But here's the truth of that. If there is a God, there is also an adversary. And the adversary knows that if we actually understand ourselves the way God understands us, he becomes terrified. That's scary to him. Because now we have confidence. Now we have self-love. And self-love and confidence in ourselves, and then a deep connection with God, like those three things right there, he becomes terrified of. So he tries to get us to believe something that's not true because we won't act upon things that we don't believe. One of the things that I've noticed, working with people in like working with them on their self-love, is it's more uncomfortable for people to believe that they're amazing, that they are like fierce, that they are a goddess. It is harder for people to believe that. Are you a faithful listener to the other side of the struggle? Have you loved the other side of the struggle for as long as you've been listening to it? Have you been waiting and begging for more episodes to come out? Well, good news. Come 2026, the very first part, the other side of the struggle, is coming back better than ever, better than it's ever been, just for you listeners. So now you can heal your trauma in ways that you've never realized were possible before. So tune in, 2026, we're coming back. It is harder for people to believe that they have a purpose, a plan, and that they really, really feeling how amazing they really are. It is harder for them to believe that because, and I should say easier for them to believe that they're not good enough. Because somewhere we have been taught that true humility is not believing in ourselves. But here's what's interesting about that. If humility is us dissing on ourselves, what are we actually saying about God's creation? We're actually saying he's imperfect in that same sentence, in that exact same breath. See, for me, I can't do that. If I believe that Jesus Christ crawled upon the cross for me and was nailed to the cross for me, here is the creator of this world, the God of this world, my ever-loving Savior, who saved me from all of the clutches of the adversary. If he gave his life for me, in that way, who am I to say that he was a fool for doing so because I'm not worth it? I can't do that. If I'm not worthy, then Christ made a mistake doing that. It doesn't make sense. One of the greatest things we can do on this planet while we have a life is ask the Lord what he made when he created us. Now, here's the deal. Yes, sometimes we fall really short of that. And we're not meant to live that perfectly right now. That's not what we're meant to do. We're meant to discover that person. We are meant to explore that person, to truly understand ourselves the way God understands us. And for us to do that, it takes time. It takes us understanding one thing at a time about ourselves. For me, I realized that being deeply respectful was something that was really important to me. I wanted to be respectful, even to people who wanted to disrespect me. One of the greatest ways to turn that on its ear is to respect them. But allowing someone to treat you with disrespect, if we allow that, that is not respect back. We are literally saying with our action in that moment, if we don't stand up, and if we don't say, this is not okay, if we don't stand up and say something, we are telling them that they cannot do any better. That is also something that I couldn't do. If I wanted to live in love, if I wanted to live in respect, if I wanted to live in truth, then those are the things that had to come out of my mouth, my actions and my energy. That is what I had to communicate. And if I knew somebody could do better than what they were doing, I would say it. And I still do. I can clearly remember the time that one of the people that was quite abusive to me through most of my life. And I'm going to leave this person unnamed. But I remember them becoming quite abusive and toxic to me after I'd kind of come to this conclusion. And I literally looked at her and said, is that the best version of yourself right now? Is like, you sit there and say that you're so worried about me, but yet is this how you act upon concern for me? Is this the best way? Because all this feels like is your weakness, and you're blaming me for it. This is what this feels like. That kind of feels icky. I don't like that. And granted, that person was not happy to receive that at that moment, right? But again, remember, nothing I said was disrespectful. That was respectful. That was true. To me, it felt true. But I also stood up for myself in that moment, allowing them the space, giving them the space to show up better. They didn't in that moment. That was okay. I just told them, hey, you know what? It sounds like you're really struggling with this concept right now. You know what? I'm gonna leave. And I did. I left. I followed through with that. And from the course of doing that repeatedly, because what they had come to expect from me was me to take it and internalize it. But when I stopped that, and they learned that if they were going to treat me this way, that I was not going to stand for it. I was going to leave, and that I didn't believe what they said anymore. Because I knew they weren't being honest. They weren't being honest with themselves. They weren't being honest with God. They weren't being honest with me. If they were, they would act in a much more respectful, loving way. That's what honesty looks like. They could still tell me they had a problem with me, but not in that way. And once they realized that I wasn't going to listen to them yell and scream at me anymore, I was going to leave, they changed their tactics. They had to. And now my relationship with this person is better than it's ever been. And they feel happier and better in my presence because I set the bar for them to let them know that when they're in my presence, I want the very best version of them. And they like that person too. They like who they are when they are around me now. That's why our relationship is so much better than it used to be. So, but it took me actually thinking about what is true and being able to follow the paper trail in a sense to see what's true to change what was really going on in my nervous system, to be able to take action, to be able to really, you know, instead of living in fear, instead of like resisting the change, even though it was good, instead of me staying in that position, I was able to move forward, move out of it, because I had started to internalize what was true. I started actually clarifying what certain words meant to me. What was love? What was respect? What was courage? What was confidence? All of those things. I had to sit down and actually clarify what that looked like, what it felt like, how I would act if I was confident, how would I act if I was courageous, how would I act in love, how would I act in respect, how would I act, and then feel how that felt if I did those things. They became habitual, therefore my nervous system began to understand what predictability looked like. Like a good type of predictability, right? Because this is now what my nervous system like predicts. It can see how I'm going to respond to certain situations. So it's not something like change isn't something that we have to force out of ourselves. Change is something that we first and foremost have to see in our mind, right? For our nervous system to feel safe, in order for us to create change on the outside of ourselves, we first and foremost have to see it being created in our mind's eye. This is one of the reasons too why I say meditation is so incredibly powerful. Seeing things in your brain first can help you feel what it feels like, act the way you need to act, and speak the way you need to speak, right? Our communication and who we are really actually teaches people how to treat us. Like it teaches our nervous system how to respond to the world, and change becomes very natural. It starts to flow through us. We begin to love ourselves so much that we can start to see like what our next level is and start taking the steps towards that next level. And when we create safety in our mind's eye, like we really need to picture what it looks like, right? If you've like recently had a conversation that felt really toxic, that felt really not good, one of the things you can do is go back over that, look at your actions, look at the way that you showed up, and see like how can you tweak it a little bit and what could have possibly happened if you did, right? Another thing too is you can look at like, okay, if I were to show up this way, if I were to act this way, if I were to speak this way, what would happen? And oftentimes we stop ourselves right there, like, oh, well, this person's totally going to get mad and they're going to blow up. Okay, well, how do I respond to that? What are some different ways that I can respond to that? I'm used to shutting down. I'm used to retreating. What's another way I could respond that still feels safe? We get to explore that. We get to explore that piece of us. And when we use our mind's eye, it's really helpful for our nervous system to see other ways and other things that could possibly be true, and how truth actually does unlock the fears and releases the fears that are stuck in our nervous system. So ask yourself some things like, what feels unsafe about this? If we really want the change, and we're resisting the change, we need to ask, why does that feel unsafe? Right? Get out a journal and just write down whatever comes to your mind. Again, pay attention to those keywords and phrases, right? And get curious about why those keywords and phrases come up. You don't want to land in self-judgment. You want to hear it, like, what is the self-judgment? But you want to eventually land in self-compassion. Help yourself feel compassionate towards yourself. That is where change begins to happen. And that is also where we start setting some really, really good rules and boundaries for ourselves, right? The next step, slow things down a little bit. Allow yourself to not have to be around people or situations or circumstances that feel unsafe. You don't have to be there in that moment. Okay? What I would suggest instead is, if you know that you have to see this person again, or that a difficult conversation is inevitable, like I said, slow it down and play it out in your head. Give yourself some quiet time to really go through how it can look like, how it really could look like. If you said this, how would things change? If you stood up, how would it feel? Right? Etc. And then choose one tiny little thing to do differently, because that is how you start to build self-trust, and that's how you start to build consistency with yourself, not through intensity, but through peace, through safety. And you get to ask yourself, like what is it that you're trying to protect yourself from? Okay? All right. So I want you to understand that healing isn't linear, okay? It is oftentimes quite messy. It sometimes is all over the place, healing is, right? But resistance often shows up before expansion. And what I mean by that is that before you finally start to get into that change situation, realize that you will have some resistance that comes up. That resistance isn't truth, okay? It's simply resistance. And you need to get curious about why that resistance is showing up. Realize again that healing is going to feel a little bit like a fracture to some degree. It's going to feel like it's all over the place, but eventually it comes back and it simplifies your life, simplifies your actions, and it simplifies the outcome. And it feels safer and it feels more at peace, because how to know if you have a really good healed nervous system, that shows up in self-confidence. If you don't have self-confidence, your nervous system's all over the place. Because true safety lies in your consistency, in your predictability, and knowing what you're going to do to show up for yourself. Having your own back really is, and being your own best friend really is, the key to healing your nervous system. Okay? All right. So that's it for this week, my loves. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Healing your nervous system is a really big piece to creating consistency for yourself, creating peace, and giving yourself the permission to take the steps that you know you need to in order to truly heal you from whatever it is, whatever block, whatever betrayal, whatever trauma is pulling you back and telling you, nope, 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 don't go there. We really do need to heal our nervous systems in order to make the moves that need to be made. Okay? If you guys are ready to make some bold hearts, some big moves, go check out that podcast. That's on all major platforms as well. I especially would tell you to check out the episodes about boundaries. And until then, my loves, I'll see you on the other side. Bye. Hey guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me today and listening in on this